Cool. So I guess we'll kick off, but I just wanted to, first of all, welcome to everyone. This is kind of what we want to do, is to learn from the people who are doing courses and then to feed that back into their learnings, and then also how we apply that in our sailing context, which is quite unique and quite different to a lot of other sports, which is our challenge, as you all know. So we've got Thomas Crook, and Craig Keenan, who I think is going to join us shortly, and Kirsten. We're at our first course of energy systems, and they're going to share their learnings and then hopefully lead a nice discussion about how we apply that into sailing. Yeah, and then that wider discussion on how we apply that in our sailing context. But before we do that, I thought might be nice, which is probably what I forgot the last time, was just to maybe if we just run around the room and introduce ourselves, maybe where you're from, what part of the country you're in, who you're coaching right now, and maybe share something what you're working on with your coaching or what you want to get out of the CK course. Yeah, so who should kick it off? Scott? Hi, Sally.
Scott now.
I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. Hey guys. Scott, I'm from Auckland. I used to sail the 49er, which up until a few years ago, and then I started coaching the 29er for a couple years. Actually not really doing much coaching at the moment and probably not much in the works. So we'll see what coaching comes up in the next year. But I am working full time at ASB, so that's probably a reason why they're not bringing me on coaching too much. But yeah, here to learn a bit more, and yeah, that's me.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. Melinda, where are you at? You're muted.
I'm living in Auckland, and I am currently renovating a house, and have a small business which I do a bit of coaching through, funnily enough, but it's very much not high performance. And at some point, I would love to get into helping kids. I worked for 10 years at a school, and we dealt with all sorts of situations and supporting girls through teenage sport and younger. So yeah, and I still have that passion, wanting to help girls and anyone through high performance, and yeah, just honing my skills really.
Cool. Thanks, Melinda. Who's next? Brownie.
G'day everyone, I'm Brownie. Living in Auckland, originally from Christchurch. Doing a little bit in the development space with mainly double-handed boats at the moment, and yeah, off to the States on Friday for 10 days for a money running trip. To be
Those
honest,
US dollars are pretty good, aren't they?
yeah, old Donald Duck's doing a good job at the moment. Keep it up.
Cool. So I guess I'm Jenny. I'm women's sailing manager, but now I've just moved over to coaching the 420s. Used to coach the Ilka Sixes, and I guess I'm trying to get my head back in the game of the double handers and helping with a small class, which is a very important class, but trying to build the numbers. And yeah, I mean, I firm believer that the 420, and I know Snowy will agree with me, is a good class for developing all those skills that will with that crossover to every other boat you sail. So that's me. Snowy, welcome.
Hey guys. Yeah, I've just been working with the IQ women for the last yeah, and done a lot of 470 sailing before that. Everything's pretty busy at the moment before going to Palma. Yes, I didn't manage to make the last get together at Mish, but yeah, keen to hear what other people learn, and yeah, all full noise on the water, most days a week at the moment, and if not in the office as well.
Sweet. Thanks for joining us, Snowy. Matthew, you just got off the water?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, just got off the water, coaching some, trying to semi-learn to sail, semi-race. It's a little bit frustrating tonight though, actually, but it's all right. But yeah, I'm Matthew. I coach the skiffs, and lead the foundation, Russell Creek Sailing Foundation at Manly, and so quite busy doing a whole range of different boats and different levels. Yeah.
Cool. And of course, we've got Kirsten.
Wait, me? Sorry.
Yep, you.
Hey guys, I'm Kirsten. I'm the coach development manager at Yachting New Zealand. So I'm taking this course for one, my own coaching. Not coaching anything currently, but just to learn more about coaching in the pre-high performance and high performance space. Just as an upskill for myself. And then the second reason is so that I can help develop more coaching resources for our coaches, and also so that I understand what's in this program so that I can recommend it to the right coaches as we do new cohorts every year, so that we can continue to build our knowledge in the coaching space around the country.
Cool. I think that's everyone. So I'm going to just fade into the background and pass over to, oh, there's your cat in the background. Kirsten and Scott, and hopefully Craig's going to join us soon. And that they were at the first Energy Systems core knowledge course. So we'd love to hear what you learned and how that works in our sailing space. And of course, any questions, flick them on the chat or just blurt it out as we go. It's just we want to discuss and learn from each other as we go.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Thomas. I'm an IQ sailor. Did the last 4 years campaigning, and then doing a lot of coaching at the moment. I'm back at uni as well. So that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. Can everyone hear me? I was at the core knowledge course with Kirsten and Craig and Barbara Kendall actually, and it was a pretty big range. So just I'm not sure what I guess other people's level are with what we might have covered, but it's sort of energy systems went over what energy systems your body uses for various types of activity and how to fuel those energy systems appropriately, and also touched on a little bit how to get sort of how to develop those different systems. So whether it be strength or power or endurance. So yeah, quite broad over the 3 days. But for me, I guess I think the biggest takeaway was the nutrition side of it, and I guess the importance of that from a pretty early level. I think a lot of the people in this chat sort of at a higher level or have been at a higher level of sailing than I ever have got to. So I guess probably there's some pretty good baseline knowledge of like where, the importance of nutrition in our sport, but I can give some pretty good sort of anecdotal stuff from the discussion if that would be useful. Just do a thumbs up if you'd like to hear, I guess, some of the stuff. Sweet. So I guess a lot of the studies that they looked at were track and field athletes and rugby players, because that's a lot of what they coach, and also some rowing. And that's important because the amount of time you spend exercising is really important for how much you need to focus on the fueling. Sort of a lot of their trainings were based around an hour to 2 hours. and looking at the fueling requirements for a session of that sort of length. It's an impressive amount of food that you need to add into a normal sort of day. Like you're looking at sort of 4 reasonably big meals and a couple of snacks throughout the day. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but something around 3,500 calories for the sort of standard athlete profile that they were looking at. That was interesting to me because they were really stressing at how easy it is, especially for our young athletes, to underfuel for their sets. And I think for sailing, and looking at my own campaign as well, we're looking at 2, 3, sometimes 4 hour sessions on the water, and a lot of time either side of that faffing around with rigging and boat work and briefing and debriefs. That all culminates to a really long time where you're not eating during the day, and also a massive amount of time to build up quite a big energy deficit. As just a number to throw out there, I remember I was burning close to sort of like 5,000 or 6,000 calories of exercise in a day on a big day of training, which is a lot of food to put in. So I think in terms of actionable steps, well, I guess just to build on the importance of that, they talked a lot on sort of if you're underfueling, your body will downregulate all of its more fundamental systems in the background to the point of, like a survival instinct, what you absolutely need to survive. So in the worst case, extremely underfueled sort of famine situation in real life, or historically, you're kind of basically just keeping your brain working and some of your very basic internal organ systems. And then the sort of first things to go are the non-required things. So a bit of locomotion, so like your ability to move, your fertility is harmed, which is a big part of what they're talking about with girls specifically as a warning sign for relative energy deficiency, which I think is quite a big risk in our sport. And then sort of, even worse than that, if you continue to be underfueled, effects on gut health and sort of an ability to digest stuff properly, and can often pick up symptoms of sort of irritable bowel, even if you're not actually necessarily allergic to anything. And then chronically also bone density drops, which is a big problem for our young athletes. They were talking about track and field athletes, sort of bone density being one of the biggest predictors of whether they were able to sort of have a sustainable career, to stop stress fractures and similar injuries. So basically, in an umbrella way, it's like the underfueling. It doesn't have to be a massive amount, but doing it chronically over a long period of time can have some pretty big downstream impacts on our younger athletes. So not growing to their full size, having low bone density, and specifically for girls, impact on their period cycles. So that was not necessarily, I don't know, Kirsten, you might want to chip in at some point, but not necessarily talked about as like specifically that was like they didn't have too much evidence on the impact of that specifically long term, of actually just losing a period, whether that affected your fertility long term, etc. But they talked about it a lot as being a really clear warning sign for all of the other symptoms. So the gut health, the bone density, and higher risk of mental health issues, etc., along with just an inability to recover from sessions and go repeatedly. So they sort of talked about developing more sort of healthy conversations with our female athletes about making it more normal, talking about their periods and sort of, reproductive health more common as like a warning signal for some pretty serious implications as a result of underfueling. There's some scary stuff in there, but I think the upshot, there's plenty to get excited about if you get the nutrition right. And basically, if you get it right, the opposite happens. So I think we hear a lot about like metabolism and how that impacts some people's ability to lose or gain weight or whatever. But essentially, in our sort of, if you're active, your body will sort of upregulate all of the performance related markers if you're eating enough. So you'll be able to recover more quickly. You'll be able to use your muscles for longer, and you'll be able to put more strain in a session and adapt to that session more quickly and do it more often, without feeling completely wrecked and without having that massive increase in like injury possibility. So essentially means we can train a lot harder, more safely. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a big shift in weight, which is obviously an important consideration for some of our classes. Most probably trying to gain weight these days, but even if we were trying to stay at the same weight, I think like some healthy look in the mirror when we're timing our eating could probably increase the quality of our training significantly without actually changing the weight at all. So I guess some workable steps for me moving forward to make this like tangible, because there's lots of theory and lots of reasons why eating is a good thing to do. And I was convinced in the first few hours, but I think what I'm going to take forward from this is we're planning a bit of a sit-down session with the wider sort of pre-performance group and start off with some of these metrics, talking about, I think, a really good anecdote from a couple of our rugby players. I think it was Damien McKenzie and Aaron Cruder back in with one of the guys that was talking to us had worked with. They increased their calorie intake by, I think it was as much as 1,000 calories on their training days. So a huge increase in intake. And they managed to gain, was it 3 or 4 kilos of lean muscle and actually decrease their body fat percentage. And that was all through a higher intake of carbohydrates, which is not really associated with those things, I think, generally. So I think sort of breaking some of the preconceptions that we have about the food groups and changing a bit of the messaging around what's okay to eat when. I think another really important one that they mentioned was a study they did of a group. I can't remember if they were athletes or not, but it was very well controlled, of getting people to do sort of 1,000 calories of exercise on a treadmill, and it was really well monitored, so they knew it was exactly that much exercise. And one of the groups were underfueled by nearly 1,000 calories, and the other group was fueled appropriately for the amount of exercise that they were doing. And after, I can't remember how long they ran the test for, but after sort of a few days of doing it and collecting the data, the report back from the group that had been appropriately fueled was that they really struggled to get the amount of food in. It felt like they were eating too much. And the group that wasn't eating enough and was intentionally underfueling reported back that they felt like they were satisfied and they didn't need to eat anymore. And so I think it's a pretty good indicator, like trusting a 16-year-old kid to be prepared enough to have food on the water and eat it. And it's really easy, even the ones that are doing that well, to be like, yeah, I'm eating enough, I never feel hungry. But that's actually not enough when you're trying to train and optimize what you're getting out of your sessions. So I think, were workable steps for me, bringing some of that evidence to the group, because I think everyone sort of picks up preconceptions from their parents or from social media or wherever it be on what food's good and what food's bad, and what a healthy diet looks like. But when you're an athlete and you're burning through the amount of carbs that our sailors are, that whole model is kind of flipped on its head. And I think giving some evidence to support that so that people are on board. And I'm pretty keen to shift the culture. I mean, especially in windsurfing, where the weight gain is also pretty important, and muscle gain specifically. I think just shifting the culture that that's what professional looks like. We all know that showing up to training on time is important, and rigging, taking care of your equipment's important, and all of the basics that we all learn. I think I want to try and fold nutrition in as like equally or more important than all those other things, and give some solid evidence to sort of support that, I guess. But yeah, so that's kind of workable steps. Next step, convince the sailors that it's a good thing, show them what good nutrition looks like, and then try and fold that in as something that's that they can adhere to. But yeah, that was about all that was mostly it from me.
Thomas, did they talk much about fluid intake?
Yeah, they talked a little bit. I'm trying to remember what they said about it specifically. Honestly, they didn't talk that much. It was more carbohydrate intake. The one thing that I did take away was that there was some studies done on electrolyte usage and whether or not that was actually beneficial. And they found that unless you're competing for 4 hours or more straight, the electrolytes actually weren't that helpful to rehydrate you while you're competing or doing your sport. So they said like you're probably for pure performance, and also like the electrolytes help because they taste good, and so people drink more of them, but they might not actually help that much. So just putting Raro or something that tastes good that also has some really good carbohydrates in it was probably a better performance combination than necessarily slamming back heaps of electrolytes, which is not to say electrolytes, they didn't say that they were important as a recovery tool after the exercise, but they just said that it's unlikely you're actually absorbing much of them during the actual workout.
And looking back at your own campaign, you piled on a bit of the poundage for speed, shape speed.
Yeah.
Now knowing what you know now, what would you change for your own campaign if you had to do that again? From what you learned this weekend for yourself?
I'll
put you on the spot, I'm sorry, but
yeah, I don't know. I think that's a tough question because like mine was so extreme. I basically ate as much as I could all of the time, and for 3 years that was my number one priority. And so I don't think there's much I could have changed, even with the right information on how to eat properly. I just don't know if I could have done it that differently, but for sure it would have helped early on to get this information, as early as possible to inform the habits. Because I think the bit that took the longest for me was just being organized enough to have food around all the time. It wasn't necessarily just the eating. So I guess learning all this stuff as early as possible and laying down some good habits. Because coming out of school, I was just like, do as much as I can and eat as little as possible, because I never brought more than like a couple sandwiches to school.
Yeah.
So it took a while to break out of that habit, I guess. But yeah, I don't think I'd do anything that different. Yeah.
And was it, when you said about timing of food, is it still straight away after exercise, just before you exercise? What was there anything around that?
Yeah, they said I think 2 to 3 hours before is sort of the optimum time for the last big meal before you perform. But obviously that's pretty tricky for us. And I remember having that conversation with Crystal back in the day, because obviously we get delayed all the time. So come regatta day, it's pretty hard to say I'll have my I have my big meal now and make sure that I'm good to go for first race, because often first race isn't when they said it would be. But yes, 2 to 3 hours before, and then like immediately after, and sort of that general carbohydrates before and protein after was like protein to repair, carbohydrates to fuel. But you need carbs afterwards as well, because your muscles will be depleted. So getting that back in was definitely a priority.
I was just thinking, I know you had to put a bunch of weight on for the IQ. Do you think it's different versus just trying to fuel for the day's activities versus you trying to put weight on and fuel? Is that a different kind of setup?
I think it's generally the same, but when you're trying to put on just more of everything,
Yeah.
because I remember when I first started eating more, I did like body caliper tests and stuff with Crystal, and I gained a couple of kilos and lost a bunch of fat. Like I was already pretty lean, and I got leaner, and then it kind of I was eating a lot more and not gaining that much, and then I had to eat more again to actually put the weight on. So I guess that kind of makes sense in hindsight with what they talked about your metabolism regulating to how much you're eating. But I think functionally it's the same thing in terms of just like having good habits around timing your eating and being prepared with enough food. But if you're trying to gain weight, you just gonna have to eat more of everything because you're going to need to fulfill your fueling requirements and then add a little bit more on top.
How much were you eating? I remember seeing you at Wakateri with the biggest like Sustainable container of pasta, like massive, and that was like your pre-lunch snack or something.
Yeah, it was kind of six of those. It was like 6,000 calories, 6,500 calories when I was really pushing. So it was quite a lot.
Yeah, and I know, and you're right. Like, I've got a teenage son, and I know another one's got teen. Like the kids probably just aren't organized enough to say bake enough pasta to fill 6 containers.
Yeah,
That takes time and effort, and I guess that's a good message to come out of it that you've got to be that organized. You've
I
got to
think
spend
so.
half a day on a weekend cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still not sure if I'm that organized. Like, I had the luxury of being a full-time sailor, campaigner, whatever, and you know, I had the luxury of I had time to get up before the gym in the morning, eat lots, go to the gym, come home, spend the rest of the day cooking and eating, go sailing, and then come home and spend the rest of the evening cooking and eating. But for the reality, like most of our kids are probably doing at least one other sport, and they've got school to contend with, so they just don't have enough time to do all that cooking and eating that I was doing. But the energy requirements are just as big, if not bigger, than mine were as a Olympic sailor. Like you, they're walking around school all day, probably got a PE class and maybe like a netball training, and then they're going sailing for a couple of hours, and they're growing. So they probably should be eating as much or more than I was, but they've got way less time to do it in a day. So I think it's yeah, should definitely be prioritized.
So that was sort of another question is like, how do you think fueling looks like in a teenage? I coach in that youth space and, down in Starling Girls space and that junior stuff. So how do you think the messaging we've kind of been doing is fueling first, anything is better than nothing, which is mostly what they're doing. Do you think that's the right messaging for that junior moving into youth and then kind of fine tuning it because you've got habits of eating as you go? Or do you think it should look different?
Yeah, it's probably not bad. I think giving them a performance reason why it's beneficial is pretty. Like, I didn't care about anything unless it made me go faster when I was campaigning, and I can't imagine our kids are much different. So I think like with as a group having some really poignant examples to point to when we're trying to like convince kids that it's important will help a lot in them prioritizing it because they do a lot just to show up there and have their kid, even half rigged and ready to go and in decent shape. They're already doing heaps. So the food stuff, I think, is at least partly a matter of prioritization. So I think bringing it to that forefront. But yeah, anything is to answer your question. Anything is better than nothing, and I think for me, like establishing the habits is more important than actually what or how much they're eating. So like for me, the only way to get enough food in was to be very regimented about it so that, I was never hungry when I needed to eat, but after doing it for long enough, I knew just like intuitively, well, okay, 3 hours have passed, it's time to eat again. And so like I think training in those habits as early as possible of like, all right, well, enough time's passed, I'm doing this much training, I need to eat again. And like I even just had a timer on my phone, like on repeat for 3 hours, and every 3 hours it would go off and I would know to eat. So I don't know if that's necessarily required for the level of fueling we're asking of our kids, but I think having really good habits for timing and sort of treating it as a fuel more so than just like, yeah, sort of removing the emotion from it somewhat and just this is what it takes. And yeah, the routine was massive for me. So I think helping the kids form a bit of a routine, like if it's just an apple, that's fine, but they remember to eat, and I think that'll grow into eating enough. But eating something's a lot harder than, eating enough. But like eating something versus eating nothing is a harder step than eating enough, if that makes sense. So I think you're right. Like, yeah,
It's those habits around it initially,
exactly.
and then fine tuning it as you go along.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So
And also,
yeah, that's
I
one
think
way to
it's
say that I
important
agree.
to know, like, just from my selling experience, what sits well on my stomach. I've got 15 minutes between a race. What actually sits nicely in my stomach to be able to perform the next. That is that whole balancing act as well, which comes with experience.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you got to try some things and see what works. Um, yeah, and I think like on the water, I think our kids are okay. Like I think everyone knows that they at least should be bringing water and some snacks on the water. But I think the big one is like having a properly big meal immediately after, and ideally in that sort of pre-rigging time before you go on the water. Like I think those are the two gaps that a lot of kids probably miss. I definitely used to just like, oh, I got sailing, I got to go, and then I'd run down to the club. I'd go sailing for 3 hours. I'd like chat with my friends for an hour and slowly de-rig, and then I'd run home, and then I'd have a massive dinner. But I've kind of missed 2.5 meals in that time. Even if I did have my sort of lollies and water on the water.
And especially often as you often miss lunch, you miss a
Yes.
whole meal
Yeah.
by racing on the weekend or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember they did a thing down at Takapuna years and years ago with the top laser sailors. This was back in Murdoch and Tom and that Sam Meach's day, and that it was actually to do about fluid. It's like what you're saying, and all the sailors, and they were Olympic sailors, turned up to the boat park dehydrated, but they all had their water bottles, they all had everything. And once they started rigging up and going sailing, they drank water, but they were already dehydrated when they turned up because they only did it when they got to the yacht club. And it's like what you're saying about pre-fueling and after fueling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
For sure.
because
And I
we do
guess
we do teach great habits of once we're there, and again, right, that's what the coaches can see. Oh, have you got your water bottle? Are you drinking? Or hey, have you had some food? But we're not there pre-sailing and post-sailing, and that's where their habits have to come in, I guess.
exactly. Yeah. I think the during the session is just like a top up to make sure they don't go fully in the red, but like actually doing it right is a matter of that before and after piece is a bigger part. And yeah, they did talk about a bit like that sort of old school marathon technique of the sort of carb load before your race, and it does kind of work. Like you can store a lot of carbs in your liver and in your muscles. So like it's the 24 hours sort of around your racing, not just the day of. And so yeah, I guess staying topped up is important too. Yeah, just to add some
Especially over a 4, 5, or 6 day regatta when you're fueling on the first day for your performance on the last day, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't have the numbers to reference, but I guess like looking at some of the things they were showing us, like the drop off in performance is just as bad as if you're just not trained enough for the event. So you can train as hard as you want, but if you don't eat properly, then you might as well have done no training in terms of physical prep because you're just going to drop off by day 3 or 4 anyway. So, yeah, working hard on the day is important, or in the moment, but fueling for it's arguably even more important.
Cool. Kirsten, was there anything from the course you that Thomas hasn't highlighted. He's been very good.
Yeah, Thomas has done an excellent
Yeah.
job going through that. I'll just add a little bit to the Reds discussion. Could I just get a show of hands who knows what Reds is? Okay, sweet. Okay, so um, for those of you who don't know, it's a relative energy deficiency, and so it's seen in young athletes to like early 20s most frequently. And it's basically when you have just such low energy availability, as Thomas was saying, that like in women, it can make you lose your period, it can give you digestive issues, it can give you low bone density, and it can affect you for life, even in your energy availability. Um, so I just wanted to touch on one of my biggest takeaways was the whole like how important it is as a coach to understand where your athletes are in their energy availability. So understanding um, are your female athletes getting a regular period? And do they understand what's healthy and what's not? And if they aren't getting a regular period, where do you go to get help for that? And where can you point them in the direction? Because obviously we're not mental health profession or sorry, health professionals, so we can't give them advice, but we can point them in the right direction. So sort of knowing where the resources are in that. And they shared with us some resources from Australia that were really excellent, all on women's health and generally reds and low energy availability. So I'll just pop that in the chat quickly um, for you guys to have a look. But I think that was one of my biggest takeaways. And there was one weightlifter who told us about her experience with Reds in her early 20s. And she had lost her period, and her coach was a man, and he actually didn't know anything about it. And so he actually asked her if he could tag along to her doctor's appointments to learn more about it. And she happily had him along. And so he learned everything from her doctor's appointments. And then from that, he started like he brought like the whole group of athletes together and had a discussion about it and sort of started that conversation and created a safe space around it. So that was a really cool story of success in like creating a new culture in their sport from something that was a real challenging situation for that one athlete. Um, yeah, that was my biggest takeaway, I think.
So my question as a female coach, I have no problem to talk about periods with females, but how does that work for you guys? Because it's not a super comfortable conversation, I would imagine, but
We had a really good discussion about it. And we talked about how one of the things that you can do in the first place is if you're getting all your athletes together and you want to create a safe space, find someone who you know is going to be a safe space for those athletes. Like if you don't feel like you yourself can provide that, then that's okay to recognize you're a man and you think a woman should be present, then that's a great recognition. And, finding the right person to come along and sort of just facilitate that discussion can be a way. But just coming from a real place of curiosity more than anything, I think is a really good way to approach it. And just hey guys, I'm on this journey too, but I'm really keen to support you and your health. And I want you guys to be healthy so that we can be the best that we can be on the water. I think sort of framing it in that way. Thomas, would you agree that that's sort
Yeah,
of thinking through?
I think for sure. I think probably adding, I guess, just making sure that it's in the context of like, I don't think that should be the first question. Like, I think it's important to give some general context to it, the importance of fueling more generally, and I guess what we're trying to spot by asking those questions. I think, I don't know, it's case by case. Like, I'm getting to know my athletes a lot better, and I'd be more comfortable having that conversation, at least after they've been a little bit more informed on the importance of it, after like at this point. So obviously if you're just doing like AON clinics or whatever and you see them, once every couple of months, a bit more difficult. But yeah, I don't know. It's case by case, but I think just having a bit more general level of awareness around it in our sport so that it becomes more of a comfortable thing for people to talk about.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there, Thomas, about if you're only seeing people every once in a while, it's probably a lot harder. And how coaching works a lot in New Zealand. So that is quite hard. So yeah, it's just how you find that way around it, Like you don't have, I don't know of too many programs where you're seeing people week in, week out all the time.
Mm.
And if you do, you're lucky, I think, because then you do get to know your athletes a lot better and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're not seeing people regularly enough, like as Kirsten said, like identifying someone that is and would be comfortable, and sometimes informing the parents is as important as informing the athletes, especially our younger athletes, like making sure that their parents are aware of what to look for. And it sounded like there were a few sort of anecdotal cases where the parents kind of were the issue, and it made it really hard to steer the ship in the right direction, even when there were some pretty clear and dangerous warning signs for energy deficiency. So yeah, I guess finding a common thread that can talk. But yeah, it is tough to gauge, and we all know there's some pretty interesting parents in sailing, so I think it's a bit of a case by case.
But also having resources like Kirsten just shared is really good because then you can share those yourself to the whole group if need be. So that's cool.
Yeah, it seems like that education piece is the key initially, and then you've got a point of at least they're aware, and you can start the conversation by referring to the education or the resources that you've got to start the conversation if it gets to that level. But I guess what you said, Thomas, is the relationship is the key. If you don't have that relationship with your athlete, you're certainly not going to talk about their menstrual cycle for starters.
Yeah, it's pretty touchy. Like, I'm a 23-year-old man talking to 16-year-old girls. Like, get yourself in hot water pretty quickly. But yeah, I think once you know them, I think it helps. Like, we've got a nice group with the windsurfers, so we've got some, these are senior member that they'll all listen to. So I don't actually necessarily need to talk to them directly. I think like probably delegate it to her to make sure that it's something that the girls are actually discussing.
Exactly, and then know where to go for help if required.
Yeah, 100%. It sounded like GP was kind of the first call if it had been like a really long time for no periods, but they did say there was some horror stories. Obviously, GPs are really busy at the moment, so there was some mixed reviews on people's experiences on this topic specifically with GPs. So yeah, I don't know. I'd been inclined, just because nutrition's so important in our sport anyway, regardless of REDs. I think, I would probably recommend a nutritionist visit as well, just and have this conversation with a nutritionist that knows what they're talking about, like as something that's useful for sport anyway, and could probably, by the sounds of it, help with a lot of the things that a lot of the issues.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got experience of GPs are a bit hit and miss because it's not really a red flag because they seem okay, but down the road is the issue. It's the longer term effects, not the immediate, compared to what the GPs have walking through the door.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there was one story of a girl who'd came in she hadn't had her period for like a year, and they said, "Oh, it's probably a good thing." It's like, sounds pretty convenient that you're not getting your period, and send her back out the door. It's like, oh, okay, probably not the right GP to go and see about this. But yeah,
agreed. Cool. Is there anything else, Thomas and Kristen, or you think you shared all your learnings?
That's probably most of it. There's some
That's
other really good stuff about like training specific, like how to train and that stuff, but
yeah.
it's a whole nother thing. I think the nutrition one's like 90% of the gains that we could make in sailing in our group, especially.
I agree, and I think it's also, apart from fueling your body, it's, you know, our sport is decision making at the end of the day. What do they say? Chess on water.
Mhm.
So fueling the brain to keep those decisions going is super key, critical as well. But cool, thank you. This has been awesome, hasn't it, Kirsten?
Yeah, big thank you to Thomas for sharing all of your thoughts. It was excellent.
Oh, good.
And we got the romantic sun going down too, Thomas.
Yeah, you got a nice sunset. I'm gonna try and de-rig my sail before it goes completely dark.
Cool. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
well done,
Thanks,
Thomas.
team.
Impressive.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll see you very soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thank you.